Greetings, I'm Mark, and like many of you, I love coding. Today I'll be using Processing 3. You can download that at processing.org. Right now they've released Processing 4. It's in beta still, I believe beta 6. The reason why I use Processing 3 is because Processing 4 as yet does not support Android. And eventually we want to be doing stuff in Android. So I'm making these videos because when I was learning processing and Java languages, there was things that I didn't quite understand, I didn't get how to do, and there was little bit information on the web I had difficulty understanding, and now that I've got the idea of some of these things, I decided to make some videos to help others that might find themselves in the same position I was in. And today what I'm going to show you is how to flip an image. What's going on in some of the games that you might be writing or apps that you might be writing is you might have a image that's faced this way, and that same image is going to be flipped the other way. For me, when I first started to do this, I was taking these images, just making 2 of them, and using Photoshop to flip it. There is a nice bit of code that you can use to flip it. We are going to be using the scale function, and this little alien hand is basically what we're going to end up with. And as you can see, when I click the hand, it flips back and forth. So let's get started. As I've said in previous videos, I have created some presets that pretty much all your sketches are going to have in it, but I added a little something extra that I like when I start a sketch. And so I have a startup sketch that I created, and that's here, I call it P3 startup. We're clicking it on. Okay, here's what's going on here. Let me get this larger for you all. Okay, what you can see here, and I've explained this in other videos, that I have something here called surface set location. And what that does is it allows you to take your sketch display window and put it anywhere on the screen. Now, I use it because when I click it, its default is the center of the screen when I click run, and I want it just kind of out of the way. And here you can see what I've created here allows you to put the sketch display window into the upper right corner. So what I'm going to do right now is show you what that kind of looks like. But before I do that, I'm going to change the size of the window. By default, processing, what it does by default is it has a 100 by 100 display if you don't define it. We're going to define it right now using the function size, ZE, and I'm going to do a 800 by 600 display window for this sketch. I'm using a 4K monitor, and I've mentioned this in previous videos, that if you're using a 1080p, you might want to take these numbers and divide them by 2. And right here, we can actually run this. Let me, I've done it again. When I start up my processing startup sketch, I should change the name immediately, which I didn't do. We're going to save as, and we're going to call this, let's call it FLIP, flip image. Flip image, and save that. Okay, now I'm going to run it, and you can see that it puts a screen into the upper, or a display window into the upper right. What we're going to do now is just take this. Let me take this whole line. When I'm experimenting, rather than rewrite a line, I kind of like to copy it. Control C. That way for some reason, if I change it too much and I can't remember or whatever, too many undos, I've got a copy of it. And so I'm going to hit Control V to paste it. If you're familiar with how to comment something out, these slanty lines here does that. Okay, now I'm going to take this and just turn this to 0. And what we're going to do is, having this at 0, 0, we'll put it in the upper left corner, and we're going to Control save that and run it. And so you can see that now it's over on that side of the screen. And again, you can place this anywhere, but I find these two locations kind of like out of the way, and if you're doing like I'm doing, creating a video, it automatically pops it up out of the way, and you don't have to worry about moving it away. Okay, let's get started with our code. Now, the first thing we're going to need to do is load in our image. And to do that, first have to declare. We have to declare that image. And we're going to do that in this upper part here, which makes it a global variable. Anything you declare up above setup is a global variable. And I'm going to declare this using a processing function called pImage. And we're going to give it the name, let's just call it hand. H-A-N-D, hand. Okay, now the next thing would be to load that image. Now you're going to need to do two things to load the image. First, you're going to need the load image function, and the second thing is you're going to have the image. And you can use any image you want. I'm going to use that little alien hand, and you can maybe figure out why. And if you really want to know, you can ask me down in the comments. Okay, now to do that, we want to say hand equals LOAD image. Then we give it the name. Well, and I've named this one alien hand 02. Oops, and I forgot the one thing. Actually, two things. First off, it's a PNG file, but PNG file, and also you need to put this in quotes, double quotes. And there it is. Now, okay, now just writing in load image still will error out unless you actually put the image into the sketch. And to do that, you can drag and drop it right into your sketch, which I'm going to do. I'm taking my image. You can see that alien hand right there, and I'm going to drag it and drop it in there. And to show you that it is there, I'm going to go into Show Sketch folder. You can see the name of our sketch right here, Flip Image, into Data, and you can see there's our image. And now let's continue. The next thing we want to do is display that image. Okay, let's just go into Draw. And to display that image, it's pretty basic. You type using the image function, img, okay, image function, and the name of the image, we called it hand. And now image requires 3 parameters: the name of it, which is hand, and then the location. For now, we're just going to write in, and we're going to change this in a little bit, but we're going to write in the, we want it to display in the center of the screen. Width divided by 2, comma, HEIGHT divided by 2, semicolon. You're going to have a semicolon, of course, at the end of every, don't forget to close it with the parentheses, at the end of every line almost. Okay, This now can run. Let me again save it. It can run, and what you're going to see over here, it's where did it go? Oh my goodness. What happened is certain things like image, text, rectangles, ellipses, their default position that would be the origin for them, for these images and whatnot, is the upper left corner. Now you can change that using something called image mode. And we're going to tell, we want it to be in the center of the image. We want the center point to be the origin point of the image for location. Okay, oh, image mode spelled incorrectly with a capital. Okay, image mode, and we want to use capital center, S-E-N-T-E-R, center. Also, again, I've mentioned this in previous videos. Yeah, I've been coding since the 80s. Actually, yeah, before then. And in all those years of coding, I still type with 2 fingers. So bear with me. My speed ought to make it real easy for you to keep up. And so now we can run this after saving it. I try to save before I run it all the time, just in case. You never know. What if you run it and it crashes your system and then you don't have it saved? Okay, we're going to run it. And there it is in the center, but it's a little bit large. Let's change that. The best way to change that is right after you load the image over here, you can use the Resize function. Oh, and it starts out with the name of the image, H-A-N-D. And we're going to resize it. Resize. And Resize takes 2 parameters, and the width value and the height value. And so what we're going to do is, well, first off, we can look at our image properties and see the actual size of it. But what if you don't know the actual size of it? There's a couple things you can do. One of them is to actually get it to print out the actual size in the console. We can do that pretty simple. Let's comment this out real quick so I can show you what that kind of looks like. Let me do it down here below center. And if you're not familiar with how to print something in the console, you're going to use this a lot for debugging and whatnot. I'm going to print this out in the console area, which, let me move this up a little bit, is down in here in your processing IDE. I'm going to, let's say, PRINTLN, which means print line. And we want to say HAND.WIDTH. Comment that, and then we want to say HAND.HEIGHT, height, close parentheses, and we're going to save it. Control save, and we're going to run it. And you can see down here our image width and height, 774 by 350. Just looking at the screen, I want to just make that in half. And so I'm going to remove this. Actually, you know what? Let's just take this whole thing here and copy it, put it over here, paste it. Let me delete our print line, delete our comment, and then we want to say divided by 2, divided by 2. Control save it, run it. You can see it's a lot smaller. I like that. Okay, the next thing we want to do with this is we want to make that hand flip. Some Why would you want to do this? Well, say you have an object going across your screen this way and then it gets to the other side and you want it to come back. Well, you don't want it to be going backwards. You kind of want to flip it and have it come back. And that's what I'm going to show you right now. To do that, it's pretty simple. We are going to use the scale function as I mentioned earlier. And it takes two parameters. Now, if you just say 1, 1, it's basically taking that image and multiplying the width by 1 and then the height by 1, which remains the same. So when you see this and we run it, Control Save, same thing. Now, if we want to flip the image on the x-axis, we want to say -1. And if we run it, it's not going to work. Control Save, and where'd the image go? Oh my goodness. Gone. Because scale works hand in hand with the image function. The scale function works with the image function. When you have scale function preceding an image, what happens in the image function is a part of the scale. And so what we're going to do here is pretty much, yeah, hand in hand. Sorry. We want to multiply this times -1. And that would obviously make this a negative number. And so now if we run it, let me Control Save it, you can see the hand is flipped the other way. Right now, it's nice, blah, blah, blah. I do not like the default gray screen. So I'm going to put in a background using the background function. Now, using color and processing, its default is RGB. And RGBA, A for alpha, red, green, blue, alpha. Also default is the numbers that define the RGB alpha values, and default is 0 being the darkest and 255 being the brightest. I want to use black, and so I can just say 0, 0, 0, 0, and just to show you real quick, let's just change it to red. And we're going to say 255, turn the red all the way up. We're going to Control Save it. We're going to run it. Red. Now you're kind of getting where I'm going with this. Now I want it to be black, 0, but if you're working with grayscale, you don't need any of these numbers back here. If you're going to use, say, an alpha value, you can comma and put in alpha values, and you'd have 2 parameters as an alpha value. But we're going to just use 1. We want it to be black. We're going to say Control Save. Also run it, and you can see it's now black. The other thing is working with alpha, or rather grayscale. If we say 255, which turns up the grayscale value to the highest, what do you think we're going to get? Of course, you knew it. We're going to get white. Okay, now let's continue on. I want it to be black. Now, in order to get this image to do the flipping, as I was showing you when I was clicking on it, what we need to do is create a function to flip it. I'm going to use a built-in function. It's one of the many mouse functions. And again, you can check these out up here. When you in the help section, you can choose reference, and what reference does is it pretty much puts all the possibility of codes up on a page. Now this reference here is offline, but if you wanted to go online for more information, you can. Processing definitely has many examples There's a lot of YouTube videos out there. One of my favorites to watch is the Coding Train. I learned a lot from Daniel Schiffman. I recommend, if you're a beginner, watch this stuff from the beginning. He's got dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of videos on this subject. And he'll even teach you about JavaScript as well. Anyway, I digress. I want to get back on track. So what I want to do here is I'm going to create a function, and to do that, the first thing you need to do is create a return value. And the return value is all about if you call a function and say you want it to return a value, something that is calculated within that function alone, you would need to say what it's returning, like a string value, an integer, a float, that sort of thing. In this case, we're not returning any value, and in fact, what we get from this function will be able to be used globally, and the results globally. And so we're going to say void mouse pressed, saying if the mouse is pressed, and you always need these opening and closing parentheses. If you were actually going to have a return value, you might have something within inside these parentheses. And we're going to do our opening curly brackets, and I like to put in my closing one as well to finish off the function. That way functions get long and you don't do it and you forget, you're going to be like, where do I put that, or what happened? Okay, I'm going to control save it. Now to flip this, we're going to need a variable. And what I'm going to do is add an integer variable, and I'm going to call it s. Now up here I can actually also define it and say equals, say 1. S equals 1. But I recommend that you declare variables up above setup, and then within the setup you initialize your variables. And so the next thing I want to do here is initialize s, and I want to say s equals 1. Now we can change some things out. We can take this scale, change that to our variable s. We can take this multiplier that we created here and change that to s. Now how do we control s? Through the mouse press. And this is going to happen. What happens is when I press that mouse, it's going to go to this function. When I click on the mouse, it's going to go to this function, and it's going to do what's in the function. And I want to say s equals s times minus 1. But we can actually do better than that. Processing and Java has a lot of, and in fact C++ and so on and so forth, they all have a very similar thing where they have little shortcuts for brevity. And in our case here, we want to multiply this s by s, or by minus 1. What happens in that case is, you all probably know your math, that if s is a positive number, it becomes negative. If s is a negative number, it becomes positive. What we're going to do here is we're going to say s times equals minus 1, which is basically the same thing as saying s equals s times minus 1. At this point in time, our sketch will flip if I haven't done anything wrong. I'm going to control save it and run it. And there it is. And if we click it, no errors, and we are now flipping our little finger back and forth. Yeah, flipping the finger. Sorry about that one as well. Okay, now you're pretty much done. But let's take one more step further. We want, say, this image to move from one side of the screen and flip and come to the other side of the screen. How are we going to do that? we're going to declare more variables. And so the first thing we need to do is declare an X and Y location. Now you can do this with a P vector as I've done in previous videos, but this one we're not going to do that. And I'm going to declare them as float, which you can also declare them as an integer. And so I'm going to say float X. Now at this point in time I can drop to the next line, semicolon, drop to the next line and say float Y. But you can also declare it on the same line, X and Y. Now, why is this good? Saves you a line of code. Why is it bad? If it gets really long, it just kind of gets hard to follow. So, float X and Y. Now, once we've created this, we want to also define what X and Y is. Now, this is interesting. You can define X and Y up here, like I was showing you with the integer s. I can say X equals width, and we want it to start out in the center of the screen, divided by 2. But there's something wrong. This will work, and it won't show you an error, but you're going to not get the results you think. And the reason why is because we're defining width before we define the size of our display screen, or our display window of our sketch. What did we say before? That the default, if you haven't defined a size of a sketch window, is 100 by 100. Up here, that's what it sees, is a 100 by 100 display window, and you divide the width by 2, you're going to get 50. That's not what we want. And so you need to remove this, delete it. And I've done this and spent time looking, what did I done wrong? This is not right. And, you know, then it was like one of those duh moments. Okay, so I want to say X equals width divided by 2. And then I'm going to do the same thing with Y, only with height. Equals HEIGHT divided by 2. Now at this point in time, we can take these variables and refactor our code down here in Draw. If you're familiar with Draw, what happens in Draw is first thing that's going to happen in your sketch is it's going to load the global variables. Next thing it's going to do is everything within setup, and after that it goes into the Draw loop. And Draw tries to, at 60 times per second, to loop through this area here. Keeps looping, keeps looping, keeps looping. And what happens with the background each time it comes to background black, it's going to wipe the screen black. And then you can look at it like Photoshop layers. It's first thing black background, then you put a layer, scale, and then the next layer is the image. Back and round and round and round it goes. Okay, now we can change this here, and we're just going to say X. And over here, we're going to change this to Y. Now, we're not going to use Y in this particular sketch because we're just going to flip it on the X axis. But I put it in there anyways. And so, as of right now, if we Control Save it, you'll see that it's still giving us the same thing, and we can still flip it. The next thing we want to do is to move on the x-axis. We need to increment x along that axis, and we're going to want to do that how? Well, what we want to do here is create another variable, and we're going to call that x speed. X speed. And this is going to help us increment across the screen on the x-axis. Now we're going to define the x speed. Now x speed is about how fast it's going to move across there. And the speed at which it moves is based in pixels. And say if we just say equals 2, x speed equals 2. Now as we increment the way we're going to do it, it's just going to increment 2 pixels. 2 pixels. Each time in our loop, it is going to increment it 2 pixels and move across the screen. And so at 60 frames a second, 2 pixels a frame, it's going to move 120 pixels. Now, how are we going to do that? Okay, well, right here, after the background, I'm going to, well, you know what? Let's not do it here. Right, the first one's going to be written, image is going to come up in the middle of the screen. The next thing we want to do is increment it here, and we can do the same thing as we did before. We can say x equals x plus x speed, but for brevity, we are going to just remove this part of it here, and we're going to say x plus equals speed. That, in general, is pretty much it. Let's give it a shot and see what it looks like. We're going to save it, and we're going to run it. And there it goes. And it's going, and it's going, and it's gone. And it's going to just keep going because we didn't tell it to flip at any particular time. So now what I'm going to do is stop this sketch. You can push the stop button or the X up here. Stop this sketch, and we're going to make a control statement. Now, I'm going to be using the if statement, which is the power behind all computing. Any programming, any language, whether it's machine coding, bits or whatever, it's all based on the if statement. If a bit is on, if a bit is off. That's the very, very basic of it. So we're going to start out with if, parenthesis, and we're going to say if x, because it's incrementing, right, is greater than, we want to say the width of the screen. width. If it's greater than the width of the screen, then we want it to do something here. And we're going to, open our if statement here with a opening curly braces, closing curly braces. Now what's going to happen within here? We want, if it does equal, or if it is greater than the width of the screen, we want it to flip. But we also want it to do two things, not just flip the image, but also reverse the direction. And to do that, well, we already kind of did that down here for flipping it. And so let's just, in fact, copy this one. And we're going to put that right in here, Control V it. That flips the image. The next thing we want to do is reverse the direction. And we're going to do basically the same exact thing. We're going to say x speed, and we're going to say times equals, just like above, -1. And you guessed it, what it's going to do is create negative numbers now. And as it increments, it's going to increment by negative numbers. And more or less where we see here this plus equals, well, x speed is no longer 2, but it's -2. And so each time it's going to subtract 2 and move the other direction. So right now we can run this. We're going to save it. And let's see what we get. And it's moving, and it's moving. Oh, wait, what happened? It flipped. It flipped, but kind of not where we want it to flip. and off the screen, and it's going to keep going because we didn't also include in our if statement the other side of the screen. So let's stop this and let's include that. First thing we want to do is we want to make it, I want the hand to go completely out of the screen before it flips. How am I going to do that? Well, we're saying width. The image also has a width, but we also told we also defined using image mode that our location point is going to be from the center of the image. And so to get all the way out of the screen, as you saw, let's look over here again. I'm going to run it again. As you saw it right here, it actually flips when it gets halfway, right to the center. Boom. And so what we want to do is, how do we add that? We want to say plus, and we can say the width of the image, but I think we should do the width of the image divided by 2, because that's where it's flipping. So we want it to go just a little bit further, half an image further. And how we're going to do that? The same way we did the resize up here. In fact, I'll copy it. Control copy or Control C. We're going to put this here. Control V. Now, if we run it, and it's Control S to save it, Control R to run it, you'll see that it goes completely out of the screen before it flips, and then it flips. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to make it so when it gets to the other side to flip. Now in processing, it's using Cartesian coordinates. Processing default is the upper left corner is the 0, 0 coordinate. That means upper left is x coordinate equals 0, y coordinate equals 0. So when we get to the left side of the screen, it is 0. What we want to do is include that in our if statement. So we want to say use the or, and these what I'm not even sure what you call these double sticks, double toothpicks. I don't know what you call them. Maybe you know, you can write it down below. But I don't really honestly know what they call them, so I'm going to call them double toothpicks. And we want to say x, and if it's less than, well, we can say 0. But again, it's going to stop at the halfway point, and we want to kind of also get it past that, halfway past that. Remember, the image is location point is in the center, and we're going to do the basic same thing over here. I'm going to just copy this, Control copy, and we can put that here and say minus. This is not minus. We want to say minus hand divided by 2, so that splits the image in half, divided by 2. But we don't need this 0 here. We can take that out, and I'm going to just close this in a little bit to that. And so now this, what it's going to do is turn back and forth. I'm going to Control save it, and we're going to hit run. It's doing it, but I'm going to hit stop. It's a little slow for me. Is it a little slow for you? Maybe it is. I don't know. But I'm going to change our speed up here where we said 2. Let's change to 5. And Control save, Control R, run it. Now it's a lot faster, as you can see. We can get the results a little bit quicker. Our hand's going back and forth and back and forth. And it still does the click as well. And that is it. That is where we were trying to get to. And so what I would recommend here is experiment with this. Use your own image, try it on the y coordinate, or try it on both. It's basically going to be the same. Your if statement might change a little bit. Actually, to do this if statement, I want to kind of make it look a little cleaner by indenting so we know everything within here is a part of that if statement. All right. I hope you liked it. If you have any comments, any suggestions, any questions, you can do that down below. Otherwise, thank you so much for tuning in. And as I always say, it's never too late to learn to code, and it's never too early to learn to code. Please, all try to be happy and always be good to one another. Thank you.